user group. We're 9 years old. We started as the Austin Spug. Central Texas? Did we really? Okay, and 9 years old, right? Jim is one of our forefathers here, Jim Adcock. Yeah. Who has been attending Spug meetings for more than 4 years? Stand up. Stand up. Please. Okay. No, if you've anywhere in your, no, stay standing, please. Travis, please. Okay, so what I want to do is, if you turn around, please, these are the folks that someone new to Austin or someone new to SharePoint, you might want to go out of your way to meet anyone but Travis, okay? Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks, ladies. Okay, now if I can ask, who is new to the Austin Spug? Okay, great, welcome. Why don't you all stand up just for a second, just to embarrass everyone equally? Okay, fantastic. And how did you hear, Sean, about us? Jim invited me. Okay, terrific. And Jason, you came in February? Okay, awesome. Nerdy friend. Okay. Okay, terrific. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for finding us and making it a part of your priorities to get here tonight. You're going to find a community of very sharing and caring professionals. And it's that same way across the globe. SharePoint user groups in every major city, and you're going to find this. You'll find people of different experience levels. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The culture here and elsewhere is fantastic. So, let's see, session recorded. Jim McFadden, if you wouldn't mind standing up. If you could please, Jim is one of our core organizers for the user group, and Jim is our meetings and events guy. So if you haven't checked in with your attendance, could you please check in with Jim? And attendance is important for two reasons. A, it helps us keep accurate food counts as we are tracking attendance and who shows and who doesn't show, because we want to be very good stewards of our sponsorship dollars. We want to be accurate, and we want our sponsors to know that we care about their spend. It also helps us plan for our meetings and our own meeting planning. And it helps y'all, because when you come to a meeting and you're not able to collect all the cards, and you maybe remember a name, but you want to follow up on our meetup site, you'll see, here's who came to the meetup, you'll see the photo, and this button that just says, nice to see you, nice to see you, nice to see you. So Meetup makes it really convenient for you to follow up with someone that you talked about here. So please see Jim for accurate attendance. Any announcements from our community organizers? Andrew, maybe talk about where the SharePoint is going to be located?
Black Star Co-op Brewery. I don't know, a mile and a half, 2 miles away. We went to the last meeting, and it's a really good spot.
Okay. Black Star Brewery. Yeah. It's a little weird to get to. Google Maps is going to help you get there, but it's a few minutes away. It's not that far away. It's like 5-10 minutes away.
The address is 7020 Easy Wine Drive.
Can everyone hear? No?
The address is 7020 Easy Wine Drive, and it's right off North Lamar. So it's kind of just quick little zigzag 2 miles away.
Thanks, Andrew. So Andrew is a co-organizer of the community. He is our sponsorships and strategic alliances, and for some reason, he wanted social thrown in the mix of his leadership capacity. I also want to acknowledge Uday. Uday is our education chair. Gina is our online marketing and social. And Gina, are you here? Okay. Jim, we've met. I'm the facilitator. I'm a facilitator. And Richard Calderon from Microsoft, he is our fearless leader, and he sends his regrets he couldn't be here. Microsoft has him on the road a lot for some unknown reason. Yeah, Uday and your organizers, of course, take education very, very seriously. It's why we're here outside of the networking and the information sharing we do informally in building friendships and camaraderie and professional relationships. We did a membership survey in January. We have a very good indication of the topics that are of interest to the members. We have a very diverse membership. Everything from users, power users, to consultants, to heavy devs, to IT, share on-prem, on cloud, in the cloud hybrid. So we have a diverse membership. It can be a bit of a challenge trying to hit the sweet spot every time, but Uday and your organizers, but Uday in particular, we have a very methodical way of organizing speakers and topics. Okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to Andrew before that, I need to thank our sponsors here at Rackspace. Rackspace is our sponsor for our meeting location. So Matthew Jagiello back there is our host at Rackspace. Matthew, thank you very much. And it was Matthew and Carla Kroll, the executive sponsor, that made our reignition possible. We did not have a home, and we were looking for a home, and Rackspace stepped up to the plate. They sponsor a lot of user groups in town, and they wanted to sponsor us, and we can't thank them enough. Andrew, the floor is yours.
So this meeting is sponsored by Catapult Systems. So they've not only provided the awesome session we're about to hear, but they've also provided the delicious meal in the back of the room. To kind of kick things off for Catapult Systems, we got Jim Booth, who's the GM of the San Antonio and Austin areas. So please give it up for Jim and Catapult.
I normally don't get applause. So thank you guys for being here. Just a little bit about Catapult. Some of you guys have known us for a long time. Just to kind of make it simple, though, Catapult was founded 23 years ago, right here in Austin, and it was one of the fastest growing startups for many years. In terms of our involvement with SharePoint, we were there from the very beginning, and we've been there all along the way. And you'll see tonight, we're continuing to be some thought leaders in this space. And so we love the fact that there's lots and lots of people in and around the community who are very active in SharePoint, stretching it, growing it, making it better, using it as a platform for business. I have a number of my team members in and around here tonight, and so I'm glad that they are here. Just to kind of make it simple, Catapult does a couple of things. We do really sort of three main things, and then a couple of add-on services around that. One thing that we do is a complete cloud platform support. So if you think about cloud platform, it's all of the infrastructure. I think you can move on from that. I'll stay on this slide, but the easiest way to describe it is cloud platform is operating system and up, operating in the cloud. So you still need to do identity management, you still need to do VMs, you still need to do systems management, you still need to do ADFS, you still need to do all of that stuff in the cloud, and all that cloud platform support is something that we absolutely specialize in. We also absolutely specialize in custom development. All the Azure development and on-premise development, building out custom applications when people need that. But really one of our biggest strengths is cloud productivity and any type of productivity development, and SharePoint's right at the core of that. CRM as well as BI solutions. But when you're really looking at productivity development, utilizing a platform like SharePoint to custom configure solutions and applications, you guys know it because you'll do it all the time. There's just hardly any other platforms better than that. And so this is one of our strength areas. Two other things that we do is we also provide ongoing managed services. What that means is that if you've got something that's in place and you need partial or part-time help in order to continue to maintain it and make it better, we actually have a group specialized in that so that there's people that can help companies who need support with any of their cloud platform, cloud custom development, or cloud productivity solution, and they just want to get part-time help with that and to continue to maintain it and operate it when maybe they don't need a full-time person. And then we've added a new thing that maybe some of y'all haven't heard before, is what we call advisory services. And this is actually high-end management consulting around process engineering, user-centered design, organizational change management, some of those kind of strategic planning type of systems alignment activities to make sure that companies are comfortable with how they plan to spend their investment dollars and achieve goals with their IT objectives. And we do that kind of at the C-level suite and helping companies kind of help guide and direct where they're going to be investing money in. So those are that's a basic flyby of all the different things that Catapult does. But the best thing about us is, one of the best things about all the places that you guys work at is the people that you work with, right? And so I just want to introduce David Warner. David has been with us many years, and he's been really one of many guys that's been in our organization that kind of helped some of the thinking around strategic usage of SharePoint. And tonight he's got a topic around some of the direction and changes that the platform's going and some of the things that might be different for all of us going forward. So let me hand it over to him.
How's everybody? Full. All right. As Jim mentioned, I'm going to see how far away. Can you guys still hear me when I'm standing this far away? Am I? Is it okay? We're going to talk about SharePoint development tonight. So as he brought out, my name is David Warner, managing consultant with Catapult. You can see my Twitter handle and my email there, so feel free to contact me if you have any questions about tonight, or we can talk after. We're going to be talking about SharePoint branding tonight. I'm going to look to you guys to be as interactive as you possibly can, because I want to have you help identify some of the areas in which we can make changes within the SharePoint branding space. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a retrospect. We're going to talk about early SharePoint development first. And so I'll ask you, how many of you in the process of working with SharePoint via development or branding administratively felt like you stepped in a ring and went toe-to-toe with SharePoint for 15 rounds? It's a fight, right? And how many of you feel like SharePoint won in the end? Right? Absolutely. You definitely were stepping into a ring with Microsoft's platform, feel like you're boxing, and you're not alone. You feel like you've got a mighty opponent against you. And oftentimes, this is how it ended. Right? You're down on the mat, and it's a TKO winner, SharePoint. But we're going to stick with the boxing theme tonight. So how many here are familiar with the term or the name or the franchise, or at least a fan of it, Rocky Balboa? I got a number of guys out here. Come on, I know you're all familiar and fans. You're middle-aged like me, so you got to know it. Now, there's an interesting parallel between Rocky, the first 4 movies, and SharePoint versions. Okay? And we're going to go over that tonight. All right? Yeah. I don't get the music for you, but we're going to see an interesting parallel. So we're going to start with one of the originals. Now, you may not say 2007 was the original, but for all intents and purposes, it was the first one of any value for SharePoint. When you think about, right? When you think about Rocky 1, he was a scrappy little fighter looking to make a name for himself. All he really wanted to do was compete. He wanted to go 15 rounds and prove. He didn't go out to win necessarily, but he wanted to prove he could compete. Now, we know that in the end, he lost by a decision. And some would say he actually won, but it was a decision, went to Apollo. Occasionally, in 2007, it would appear we beat SharePoint. but most of the time, SharePoint won by a decision. And we'd feel it. We felt beat, right? 2010, Rocky 2. Now, at this point, our beloved character knew his way around the ring, right? He had been in the ring before. We too knew our way around SharePoint a little bit more by now. We understood the master page. Things made better sense. Content placeholders made sense. Customizations became more familiar to us. The master page modifications were doable, but they still took a lot of effort. We still had to go 15 rounds, just like Rocky did in Rocky 2. Occasionally, we felt like we won and SharePoint lost, but we had to fight 15 rounds to get there. Okay, everybody with me so far? 2013, Clubber Lang, Apollo Creed, they match up. We brought some exciting new things. Rocky at this point was on a roll. We were on a roll in SharePoint 2013. We had new innovative things, search, content search web parts we could leverage. Custom master pages matured. And so we felt way more comfortable innovating in that space. And so the innovation thrived. And for a time, it was pretty enjoyable. Then we got even more excited because something new came on the screen, SharePoint Online. Now, this was going to be epic, right? Because what did that mean? No more massive VMs. We didn't have to tote around something like this with 32 gigs of RAM and an SSD if we were lucky, or a third external hard drive or something like that. It was hard to develop in SharePoint when you had to have a VM. It was going to be cloud hosted. It was going to be a Microsoft managed infrastructure, and no more full trust code. It was like Clubber Lang knocked us out. And so what was the prediction? Now, you were all Rocky fans. Come on, let's hear it. Pain, right? But we learned how to deal with it. They came out with new things with SharePoint Online, new APIs for us to work within. And so we continued on. It's matured. We got things like provider-hosted apps, add-ins, as of today. CSOM and JSOM matured, right? And then they dropped the bomb. Don't modify the master page. Now, I don't know about you, but when I heard this, it felt like a big, blonde Russian just beat the life out of my best friend, and I'm watching him lay there on the mat. And what does Microsoft say? What did Drago say? If he dies, he dies. Our master page, our ability to modify and brand an environment is dead without the master page. What are we going to do? What do they expect us to do? Is this now, are we living in a communistic environment where Microsoft tells us exactly what we can do and how it's going to look? And I guess we'll have to be comfortable with SharePoint out of the box. Who likes SharePoint out of the box? No, I know you're lying. You're just trying. From a branding perspective, who likes SharePoint out of the box? Nobody. Yeah. Nobody likes SharePoint out of the box. It's not engaging. It's not inviting. It's not an experience, right? If you've ever worked with me, you'll often hear me say, you can create an application that cures cancer functionally. But if it doesn't look good and it doesn't provide a good experience, no one's going to use it. It'll save their life, but no one's going to use it. And so it needs to look good. It needs to be able to get user adoption. You want people to get excited about using it. And that means that you have to brand it. But what do you do without a custom master page? What options do you have? Well, let's think about that. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at a fully branded site. It's a simplistic site, and I'll show you here. Let's see. And why else would we not maintain the Rocky theme? Okay, so it's a simplistic landing page when we look at it. Now, what we're going to do together is we're going to analyze and inventory the content. And we're going to identify what can and cannot be used or created or branded without the use of a custom master page. You guys ready to be interactive? Okay. All right, let's first talk about what we know we can do. You take out the custom master page. What is the one area that Microsoft gives us to add in a reference to an external file? CSS, alternate CSS. But how much can we do with alternate CSS? Yep, manipulate, move things around. You're not going to manipulate the content necessarily, maybe, if you're using advanced CSS3 and stuff like that, but you're not going to do a lot of damage, right? It's the one area that they give us. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through some of the functionality that we see here on the screen. Yes. They, and I consider that completely Microsoft. Some now may say, you know what, I don't want to modify the page layout because I want to just leave it out of the box and as is. But page layouts are one of the main areas that they actually do still support. You could, yep. So the content placeholders within there, absolutely. So what she's talking about is an additional content placeholder that allows you to inject stuff from the page into the head. Now what that means, yes, anything, really. But what that means is that don't ever use an out-of-the-box page layout, and now every page layout has to include a reference to all your files. So it's a little heavy-handed, but you could do that, absolutely. Not the best practice that Microsoft recommended when they suggested going away from a custom master page, but that is an option. Okay, so I'm going to bring up our screen here, and we are going to use this to inventory our site. We're going to work towards no custom master page. So when we go back, let's go ahead and walk through the feature set here, and then I'll ask you guys to help identify some of the things that you see, okay? So we've got a navigation, we've got a logo, a search box, we've got a slider here. We've got some quick links down here with what appears to be some images, so we'll take a deeper look at that. We've got some frequently asked questions. We've got our upcoming events and why not, our charity fight with Thunder Lips. Well, remember, Hulk Hogan. And we've got some recent news coming up that's not quite Rocky branded, but maybe we'll get there. Now, the navigation is not just any navigation. It is a mega menu that has a fully customizable collection of groups of links. You can define the columns in which they show up. You can define the sort in which they show up. And as you would expect, the entire site, as we'll see here, is responsive. So you'll notice things start shrinking, and as I get down to smaller, they go from 2 columns where it gets to illegible at 1 column, they completely collapse. Got our search showing up here, and our navigation then reformats. Now this is notable because you'll notice that the functionality of the mega menu completely changed. Now instead of having tri-columns, we have a single vertical space. Go back. Correct. Now, is anybody here not familiar with responsive design? Okay, that's okay. So what you just saw is essentially, in essence, the example of responsive design. It's one code base that allows your website to refactor based on the size of your device. Now, very rarely you should hear anymore someone saying, okay, this is an iPad view or this is a tablet view, because device isn't really relevant anymore. It's really about resolution. When you hear someone say, well, this is the iPad view, which iPad? The Mini? Retina? The Pro? 12? 9? Right? Just in the iPad family, you've got a wide array of resolution, and that's really what drives responsive design, that things refactor for you as you shrink the screen or your device changes or your orientation changes on your device from portrait to landscape. And that's what allows it to do. So you still should have, and we have here, a fixed max width, so it's never going to go any wider than a certain amount. And you should have that because you never want too much white space. If you go edge to edge on a browser, as I said, devices vary so much now. It could be a 32-inch monitor, it could be a 19-inch screen, it could be a 9.7 or 7-inch tablet. And so you don't want to have too much white space. So you still want a fixed width, a max fixed width. Now what that means is that I say if we have our max fixed width at 1225 pixels and it goes down to 320 pixels, you've got hundreds and hundreds of versions of your website. And you have to think of it that way. Because as you saw, as you look here and you see, the content reformats. You've got right here, the text is rolling to the next line as it gets smaller. You've got the space between the icons shrinking as it gets smaller. You've got the slider shrinking as it gets smaller. Our menu still works, but shrinks until it gets too small, and then it refactors. Any questions on responsive design? Okay. If you go back out to Starbucks later, that's a great example of responsive design. We'll oftentimes use that to kind of show off exactly how it could also be used if our sites are not necessarily available, because let's face it, everybody can access Starbucks, right? And they've usually got a cup in their hand if they can't. Now, back to the mega menu. Now, this is significant as we talk about this, because what's actually happened here is it isn't just a CSS change. Responsive design is based on what's called media queries, which means that it's swapping out CSS when it gets to a certain resolution range. So as you notice up here, right there at the top, we've got our responsive size. So if I go up to 767, our breakpoint for responsive, meaning that's when the new CSS gets swapped in or out, is going to occur at 768. And you see now it's refactored, and it brought back in and recreated the desktop version, if you will, of our mega menu. It actually rewrote it. Now, I don't know if there's many CSS gurus out there. How many of you feel really comfortable with CSS and responsive design? Have you seen too many situations where functionality of JavaScript is triggered by a media query change? It's pretty innovative, actually, and we'll go into that. Okay, so we've walked through a lot of features. We know it's responsive. We've got data coming from lists and libraries. We've got a picture library that drives our slider here. We've got a list that drives our mega menu. So let's talk about what cannot be done without a custom master page. Of all the examples you guys saw, what do you think is going to be nearly impossible to do without a custom master page? And there's no right answer or wrong answer here, by the way. It's completely subjective. Go ahead.
I'd like to know if you get off Office 65, 365, and the little grid at the top, get that stuff out, and the icons on the right, all the SharePoint stuff.
Oh, you want to get rid of the ribbon. You can do that with CSS and stuff like that, but that's not really necessarily relevant to the, you can do that, but you wouldn't want to in an intranet. Office 365 and SharePoint is mostly used nowadays for intranets, and usually if you remove that, then you've removed their ability to function with the site. Does that make sense? They've removed.
Right now, it doesn't have any of that. It is an on-prem site.
Yeah, correct.
It has the gear. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, you can remove some of that, but the primary use of SharePoint now is for intranets. SharePoint Online, and believe me, this is another cannonball to the gut, Clubberlang to my face punch, was when they said they were no longer supporting internet on SharePoint Online, because I thought it was a fantastic competitive platform. But I understand why, because you could go spend $20 on a SharePoint site with all you can eat consumption and build the world in it for $20, and they got to support it. So now, when it's mostly predominantly used for intranets, you're going to have a license for each person so they can interact with it. So yeah, you could use CSS to remove the ribbon and stuff like that up there, but you wouldn't necessarily want to in most intranets because your users are going to interact with the pages. And if they don't need to,
The ribbon entirely, the one we're working on now, is an on-prem site, so we have the master page to work with. But there's no SharePoint stuff in the top.
right.
It's just got the gear. But it is an intranet site. and
Yeah.
They can see the ribbon. I was just asking if you could get off that Office 365 and SharePoint.
Yeah, I mean, you can use CSS to hide all that if you want to. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm just not familiar with
Yeah.
Probably don't want to hide that in Office 365 though, because that is your app launcher to take you to all the other services provided by Office 365 beyond SharePoint.
Yeah. there's too much benefit for it in the intranet space. But if all you're using is SharePoint, for example, when I go up here, you'll see that I've got access to my calendar, my mail, everything in addition to SharePoint. And so it's really ineffective in that regard if you were to remove that.
That's interesting, because maybe they should have left it in.
Yeah, I mean, you have to analyze what the requirements are for your organization and see what's going to make sense. Go ahead.
So the purpose of your presentation tonight is Intranet?
SharePoint is really about intranet anymore. You're still going to be able to use SharePoint on-prem for internet sites, absolutely. But going forward, there's going to be better options. And quite honestly, Microsoft wants you in the cloud, and you should be. If you're going to be using SharePoint for an intranet, and you don't really have any other choice for SharePoint Online, then it's really a great choice because they do manage all of that. If you think about all the things that you're not having to worry about, I mean, think about electricity and management of the servers and all of that. But yeah, most of all this is geared towards an intranet within SharePoint.
Topic should still be,
Go ahead.
the topic you're presenting though is still applicable for collaboration sites as well.
Yeah, so effectively everything you're going to see and we're going to talk about tonight, you could easily do on-prem anywhere within SharePoint. If you're using it for, now I'll digress a little bit. Who's here heard of team sites, right? I want a team site. The problem with team sites is that it has two very different meanings. In technical world of SharePoint, it means something very specific. It's limited, it's kind of siloed oftentimes. You don't have the publishing model, which means page layouts don't exist. But oftentimes when people say they want a team site, they just mean, I want a site where my team can work. They don't necessarily mean they want a Microsoft SharePoint team site. So when you think about what all of this that we're going to go over is applicable towards, it's applicable towards all that. Team sites, collaboration sites, intranets, department sites, project sites. Just about anything and everything within the scope of SharePoint, this will be applicable for. Go ahead.
I want to say something that I learned recently, and that is that publishing is enabled by features.
Mm-hmm.
The team site stuff is also enabled by features.
Yeah.
So you can start a publishing site and go in and enable the couple of features that give you calendars and create a site pages library.
Yep.
And so you can go both ways.
Yes.
You can have one site that has both sets of features.
Yep. You could start with a team site and turn publishing on. Don't advise it. There's some other things that can go wonky with it when you do that. If you know you're going to need publishing, start with publishing. Because there's all kinds of things that you get with publishing that it does. It's too many weird things. It's like the Matrix pills, right? Yeah. Once you swallow it, you're in.
Our model right now is we do instruct everyone to start with a team site and then turn on publishing.
Yeah, I mean, right. Well, yeah, and it may be that you're not pushing the envelope far enough necessarily to see some of the problems that exist. It also depends on what you're trying to use it for. But yeah, there's as long as it works for you, there's definite value in it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just learn. I just have been through that pain.
Yeah. Yep, no problem. In fact, when I created this site out of the box, publishing the calendar didn't exist, right? So I had to go in and turn on the collab features to get the calendar and all that other stuff, right? Okay, so back to the site. Is there anything that you guys have seen that you feel functionality-wise? Now, all these are web parts. We'll crack open the edit mode and see what's what. Is there any of these features you feel is going to be a significant challenge to do, maybe even impossible, without a custom master page? Navigation. No, he wasn't loaded. The navigation is certainly a challenge, so let's start there. Now, the navigation is, like I said, list-driven. What is a problem, though, with something to this degree of functionality and complexity being list-driven and on every single page? You don't get to go again. Okay, yep, performance, why? Right. Okay, exactly. And now this is in the header. It's persistent. It's not in a page layout. No one should ever put their navigation in a page layout. Now, why is that? Page layouts are for page what? content, right? So that means if you put the navigation in a page layout, what do you have to add to the page every time you create a new page? The navigation. No one wants to do that, right? But to the point made, performance is an issue. If you're querying a list every single page load, that gets heavy. But how are you going to do this without a custom master page? Custom master page, you could inject all kinds of stuff. So let's look. If I go to my site contents, and we find our mega menu, and we see it's all built here. And we can see we've got Department A, Department B, home page, and it's using folders. But again, performance can be a problem. So we want to think about that. What else do you guys see that might be problematic from a component perspective? And I'll give you a little further bone, and I'll crack it into edit mode so you know what's what. You know what's web parts and what's not. Anything else you guys see that might be somewhat problematic? The what? Oh, the slider? Yeah. I mean, yep, it's got to be responsive, right? It's got to be interactive. We can click on it. You can see it's moving on its own. What about the quick links down here? What about those? Let's examine those from a code perspective. What do you expect this to be? Does it look like just a collection of maybe icons and images? Right? But let's actually look at what it is when we click on those individual images. What is that? Yep, very good. So now we've injected into our component custom pseudo attributes. Now a pseudo attribute is a CSS technique. You'll notice this little before down here. And what the CSS is doing is saying inject content into your HTML for visual display. But it's not actually changing the DOM, if you will. We're not modifying HTML like you would with JavaScript. We're actually just injecting content to be displayed visually. But what that means is that this is a font, as you've heard, and it can be colorable, vectorable, resizable. So if I come in and say font size, I can increase and decrease with CSS. And what is it never doing? What are you noticing is not degrading? The quality. Yep, exactly. And that means I can change the color. I had to get purple in there somewhere. Right? So how could this be done without a custom master page? This is pretty advanced stuff, right? Let's see how that's managed. We go find our quick links. And when it loads, you're going to notice something about the view, and then we'll go in and edit one of the items. When SharePoint Online decides to respond. There we go. So now we notice in our view, we've got the icon stored there. And we actually see the quick link color identified, right? So let me go in and edit Amazon. And all of a sudden we notice that our form has been customized. So if I want to change the icon, I can go ahead and bring it up. Now these are all driven by, as you heard mentioned, Font Awesome. What that is it's literally a font that can be integrated visually into CSS. And it allows you to utilize essentially code that will give you the ability to build something like this. An interactive iconography selector. So I could change that if I wanted, or if I just wanted to go in, we'll leave Amazon. We'll talk about that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I'll show you that too. a little slow tonight. Yeah, so this is definitely a weird looking form, right? You're used to seeing things like a drop down or checkboxes or something like that. And so we'll come in here and we'll select a new item, and we'll start with the icon, and we'll go down here, and why not? We will select, where'd it go? Star Wars, the Rebels. And we'll call it featured. Now, featured says I want it to show up as an icon on my control. That's what featured means here. And we'll send you to starwars.com, and we'll select a color. And I think the Rebels were like an orangish color. We'll go there. And we'll save. It'll take us back. Now, alternatively, I've set this up to where we don't have to go into the form to edit if we want to. SharePoint has come out with a pretty slick new interface for editing lists that we'll see when this refreshes. The grid view. So if I just hit edit, I can double click there and change it. Now clearly, this is not out of the box, right? None of this form stuff is out of the box. It's all fairly custom, right? So when we go back to our home page and refresh, we should see Star Wars show up in our web part. And I can tell you all these are content query web parts. And there we go. We see Star Wars showing up. Although it didn't take my color. I must not have saved it. I must have changed it when I edited it. Yeah. There we go. So that's pretty custom, right? You guys think that's possible without a custom master page? Now think about it. What we've done is we're injecting all kinds of JavaScript here to overrule the form, to create a custom experience. Any problems there, you think, without the custom master page? Any challenges? This guy. Go ahead.
How do you determine which set of JavaScript is loading at which time?
Yeah, so you want to think about what's loading. Now, typically, when you have a custom master page, you can control all that, right? You can control the order. You can control what gets loaded, where it gets loaded. You could use the page layout to say, I know that this particular page is only going to have items on it that are going to use this JavaScript, so I'm only going to load it at the layout level. That's still doable. You can isolate it that way if you wanted to. But clearly, we've done a lot of customizations here. Is that fair to say? Tons of customizations here that make it responsive. Yeah. Lots of customization here to make it responsive, to make the slider interactive, to make the quick links work. Let's forget about all the functionality of the mega menu. So let's see what it looks like when we take away the custom master page. You guys want to see how much it changes when we take away the custom master page? Well, that is the point, but we're going to remove the custom master page so you can see where you're starting from. Correct. So when we go into site settings and we go into master page, and it loads, and it loads. What's the problem? There is no custom master page. Yep. So everything you saw already is devoid of any custom master page. Do you have new questions? All right. Let's get into it. Okay. First and foremost, there are what's called user custom actions. Now, user custom actions are something that allows you to register a JavaScript file or an action, a JavaScript function inside of SharePoint, okay? You can put, for example, a new menu item in your in your menu here, your site contents menu. You can put a new menu item in your site settings menu in here. If we go back to our mega menu, I woke up. You can put a custom action up there. So let's talk about those for a moment. Publish mega menu, backup JSON for mega menu. So we talked about performance being important, right? So one of the ways that we've built this mega menu to be performant friendly is it gathers its data from a JSON file. Well, using a user custom action, which allowed us to create these custom buttons up here, we created JavaScript that exports the list items into a JSON file. So now, every time the page refreshes, instead of pulling in information from the list, a heavy, costly transaction, all it does is go out to a 5K JSON file, pulls in the data, creates the HTML. And we allow the user to do so and manage it through the user custom actions. So what this does is when I hit publish, and we'll do that, we'll go in and we will change homepage to Rocky. And we'll go back and refresh. You'll notice nothing changed, right? Well, because as we said, it's pulling from the JSON file, so we need to actually publish it. And so when I hit publish, it goes through and says, your mega menu JSON has been successfully exported to, and then tells me where. Now, this is something that really mostly admins are going to do, right? This is not your average user going to go in and do this. You'll do this as a developer, as an admin. So now, if I come back and refresh, we see it's changed to Rocky. And you'll notice it's pretty quick, right? It's not like you're sitting there waiting for it to parse the JSON and load the page. We still get everything here. Any questions so far? We'll get further into how, but any questions on the understanding of the JSON and what we're attempting to do there, what the mega menu is doing? Right. Yep. And you'll notice you can go further into things. Like you'll see I created a backup. So let's say, for example, you want to think through some of these things. Let's say, for example, something just crashed in the process of creating the JSON, right? Well, you want a backup of what was there so you could replace it. So you can create a backup. We could have gone further, created a restore button to restore from the backup. All this is devoid of any custom master page, though. It's using one version of the user custom actions, which is to create a button that calls a JavaScript function. But the bigger question may be, well, how does it even know that JavaScript exists? Right? How is it going to see the JavaScript as part of the DOM? There's another type of user custom action, and that is called the script link. Now, if you've never used this tool, it's for SharePoint Online. It's called the SharePoint Online Client Browser. It lets you get into individual site collections and tenants and see all kinds of information about your site collection, one of which is right here, user custom actions. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately because they make it a little hard to do. Microsoft has not given us a form for adding or removing or modifying or deleting user custom actions. It's all done through code right now. So you could use JavaScript CSOM to do it. These were all created using PowerShell. There's a lot of scripts that you can get online that show you how to do it. But more or less what you're doing in this case is you'll see I've got, for example, we'll start with jQuery. jQuery core 1.11. And what I'm doing is I'm referencing a JavaScript file with a script src. So this is a type of user custom action that you can register within SharePoint that will automatically add the head tag, or add the JavaScript reference to your head tag, as if you had injected it in the master page yourself. Travis?
I was just going to say, for those that aren't aware, the Office Dev PnP PowerShell commandlets has a command line for injecting JavaScript with one line, one PowerShell. You type in the commandlet, the path to the PowerShell you want, and then it just does this custom action just the way you're showing, with one PowerShell line as part of the PNP PowerShell.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about the PNP in the end. But it's a small tool set of PowerShell scripts that you can use that does a lot of this stuff for you in terms of having to custom write the PowerShell scripts themselves. It's a great tool to start out with. It's not exactly going to give you an enterprise-worthy application out of the box, so to speak, much like you expect SharePoint to be. It's not perfect out of the box. You have to make it perfect. And so everything that the PNP has is a great start, but you're typically always going to want to add to it and customize it and make it work for you. But Travis is right. You can use some of those PowerShell commandlets to do some of this stuff a little easier. Still can't do it through the interface though. You're not, unless you create. You could actually create your own form and interface to do something like this, but you really wouldn't.
So what's interesting, you can use event receivers and you can use term stores. I would never expected that to be.
Term stores, yeah. Event receivers, that's another topic. Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole nother thread. So getting back to this, you can reference a JS file, and you can also reference a sequence. Now that's important because think about it. What if SharePoint decided to load another script file, for example, my mega menu file, or my utility file, or my master file before the jQuery loaded? It'd be breaking everywhere, right? The sequence allows you to identify the order in which your JavaScript is loaded. So just like when you go into the master page and you modify your master page to load jQuery, and then you want to load jQuery UI, and then you want to load whatever else you've got, right? Here I've got a whole bunch of JS that does some work. You got to make sure it's in the right order, or everything's going to break. The sequence allows you to do that. So it's as if you had the ability to modify the master page. Correct. It's like a registered reference within SharePoint. So if I wanted to go in and remove this, I can't go through any interface and remove it either. I have to use script or an app I had built or something like that to remove it. You could create a form to do it. But this is something that typically you're going to do at the beginning of your life cycle of your solution and never touch again, because your entire application is dependent on it. So it's not something that you really need to interface regularly with, like you would a list or a library or a page library or something. So what do you mean opened it? So using the SharePoint Online client browser, you can connect to a SharePoint Online site. And when you do that, it loads all this stuff here for you. One of which is the user custom action information. So for example, I could also go in and look at my lists. If you remember on-prem, there was one called SharePoint Manager, still pretty heavily used for on-prem. This is like the online version of SharePoint Manager. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's an application that you actually download. Correct. Yeah, but it runs, you don't have to actually install it necessarily. I don't think. I don't know. Yeah, it's extremely valuable for learning about information on your site. Free. Yeah, completely free and everything. It's very valuable.
What's the name of the tool again?
SharePoint Online Client Browser. And so one of the things you can see is your user custom action. So we've effectively removed the custom master page, as you saw, and we've branded a site that has a custom navigation, a mega menu no less, fully responsive, slider, iconography-based quick links that are CSS-driven. Now, what's the benefit of that? Let's talk about that for a moment. What's the benefit of those being CSS-driven and list-driven versus a library of images somewhere? What is the problem with having a library of images somewhere? Yeah, they're not going to scale.
Each image has to load independently every time you refresh a page.
Yep. Yep. Then what happens when you need to change the size of the image? Let's say you've got, well, our iconography engine has 400 and 500 and something icons in there. So let's say you had a library of 500 icons, JPEGs, PNGs, whatever.
Well, then Martin was going to say, I need everything to be green.
Yeah. You need to change the color, say goodbye to tonight. You need to change the size, say goodbye to the weekend. Right? Management becomes nightmarish. But now using CSS and JavaScript, we've actually been able to control the look and feel. We created the custom form. The custom form. How is that done? All right. Let's take a look back in our SharePoint Online client browser, and let's go up to the site columns. And we will find a category called JS Link. JS Link is short for JavaScript link. And what it lets you do is associate a JavaScript file to a site column. Now, most of the time you may have seen it in terms of like a list view web part. If you've heard of JS Link, you've probably seen a lot of examples where you drop a list view web part and there's a reference within the web part to reference a JS file, like maybe an XSL or something like that. You've seen that done before. This actually allows you to register a JavaScript file directly on the site column. That's pretty powerful because what that means is every single time you load a list within SharePoint, whatever view you're loading it is, edit, new, display, right? When I say edit, new, display, this is a display view of the form, right? I will go back to the quick links. And when it loads, what we'll be looking at is a display form for that list. When you go in to select a new item, that is the new form. When you edit an item, that's the edit form, right? We know all those things. What the JS Link allows us to do is load JavaScript that then goes and does something whenever that column is present on any one of those forms. So that's how we've overwritten the display form instead of showing what is actually being stored in that site column. And what is that site column? It is, well, it just changed on me. It is text. Yeah, it's actually a drop down, so it lets you change it, but it doesn't actually save it. Just lets you change it. So it's actually text. So what's being stored in that field is actually just a text string. How do I know and how can you see? Well, let me crack this into edit. Android, Amazon, Rebel Alliance is what that stands for. But using JavaScript and CSS, we're overriding the view. So we know what's going to be stored there. All those things are representative of the icon, and we're able to override the display of them. Nope, just a text. It's actually CSS that is applying the value because it goes in and using the JS link property, you've got JavaScript that then overrides what's actually being displayed. So the JavaScript is set up in a way that says, hey, is this the display form? Okay, take the value and go do something with it. In this case, we're doing something which is, I don't know why it freaked out on me. There we go. Which is replace it with a content, which is then overwritten by the CSS. So when we look at the actual code here for Amazon, again, pseudo attribute. There we go. It's actually using this. This is like the value for Amazon within the font. And so it knows based on this little CSS line right there, that's what's stored, Amazon. So if I were to change this to Empire, Now we see the Star Wars Empire. So just like that, we've been able to change the display of the icon. Now, if I edit the actual list item, now I've got code in there that says, and you may have just noticed, it was a quick view. If I refreshed, it was kind of latent on applying. There you go, you see it, and it shifted. That was essentially JavaScript or SharePoint going in and saying, hey, this is just a text field. There you go, you see it? Oh, but wait, there's a registration on this field to go do something, to load a JavaScript file. And now it's going to do something with that JavaScript file. Now, what it's doing, that's a whole nother topic, much more complex. And I can kind of briefly show you that code. But it allows us to override the complete experience here and provide what would normally be something completely unthinkable within SharePoint. Can change it to the heart's content. Users can. Now you don't have to go in and find out, how am I going to do this? How am I going to change all these things? Just like that, using JavaScript and CSS. No custom master page. This is a custom JavaScript modal. Yes. But it was built using recursive functions, so it's not like I went in and built the form for each icon, right? It goes through another JSON file, knowing all the icons that are available for that font, and parses them and creates this form. So as we update the font, it'll automatically update the form, just by updating the font. Now, I know I haven't gotten too in-depth into the code. That's, like I said, kind of a whole nother topic that takes a lot more time. But we wanted to talk about mainly what can be done without a custom master page. It becomes enjoyable. We say we want to, when we talk to clients, we want you to worry about how, or what, not how. How am I going to get images into SharePoint? How am I going to provision them? How am I going to get my web part to consume them? How am I going to manage them? You want the user to just worry about what? What image am I going to use? What icon am I going to select? Make the experience enjoyable for them. And that's really what SharePoint has done. And Microsoft, as much as I hated to hear no custom master page because I thought that it was going to be the end of innovation, was actually the beginning of a completely new kind of innovation. You just got to be imaginative with it and kind of forced to think outside the box sometimes. Any questions?
Is there any way you might zoom the screen a bit? I think it might be a little difficult.
I don't know with the zoom.
Browser, see if that might
You just want me to change the zoom?
and see if developer tools you go
Oh, when I go into the developer tools?
very hard.
Sure. Well, that doesn't actually. Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Yep. Sorry about that. Yeah. So JS Link, again, when you go in and we go find that, you'll notice there is a JS Link property. And again, it allows us to reference an external JavaScript file just as if our user custom action was, but it's associated to a site column. So it's just one of the many ways in which we can actually customize and brand the site devoid of any custom master page. Now, the key here to think about that is even if we had customized the master page, what kind of master page are we looking at here in this view? It's a system master page. So typically you're not going to customize the system master page anyways. But through this forced method of innovation, now we've discovered a whole new world of providing a better experience to the content authors. And think about all the different kinds of things we could do by overriding the type of content that's the way the content is stored. Yeah. And it's contextually aware, right? I've selected an icon. You saw on a new form, it knew that nothing was stored. So when I go back and say create a new field or a new form item, a list item, you'll notice it says select an icon. Yeah, SharePoint Online is not selling itself very well today, is it? So select an icon. Let's go ahead. I went in and did it. Twitter, change icon. So all that can be customized using just JavaScript. Simple thing, but provides a much better user experience. I think we are running out of time now, so any questions? Go ahead. Oh, 8:15, okay. Well, then we'll keep it open for questions. Go ahead.
Well, you said that you were going to show the navigation with the interacting. Is this part of the, can you show the navigation, the top navigation?
How it responds?
Yeah. Or how do you implement it?
Oh, okay. Well, so not a whole lot different. You're using a user custom action. So you'll notice when I go back, close my side columns, I've got a mega menu, JavaScript here. And if you know me, you know that one of the things I'm fairly rigid on is documentation. And so I'll show you quickly the code for the mega menu. So what's happening is we actually have the JavaScript file that creates the HTML. So that gets loaded on every single page. So if I go over to SharePoint Designer, here is my mega menu HTML JavaScript file. I'm not going to get too in depth because we are talking about over 1,000 lines of code to make that work, because it's splicing in the mobile version, the desktop version, and it's reformatting and calculating based on what media query you're in. It is using a pseudo attribute to figure that out. So what's happening is when it shifts between media queries, and I'll go back, I'll actually show you how that works. We have CSS media queries at the different breakpoints that say, are you mobile or are you desktop? If you're desktop, show the desktop experience, the tri-column, the full width, etc. If you're mobile, then create the mobile version. And what it's actually doing when it shifts between those two experiences, it's rewriting the HTML. So what that means, what you typically find in a situation like that is you'll just do what? If you've got two versions of your menu, a mobile version and a desktop version, and you're switching between media queries, what are you typically going to do? Show and hide. Show and hide. But what does that do? What does that do to the HTML and the DOM? Bloat. Yep. You get a whole bunch of bloat. But using this method, I could show you there, but I'll take it onto the page. When we look at the mega menu, where am I at? There is a pseudo attribute in the CSS that at the normal level, at the regular non-media query level, if you will, says I am a desktop. And it's using this class and we can see the content here is desktop. Now, as I shrink the screen, notice it now says mobile. So it's using that media query to change actual content within the screen. Right? Remember, this isn't injected into the HTML. It's part of this CSS space. But what that means is we can create a JavaScript listener based on that pseudo attribute that then goes and does work. Nope, it's just regular CSS and JavaScript. This does not use Bootstrap. Using media queries. So media queries really just change out the CSS. And I've made sure that the HTML is responsive friendly, meaning I've built it in a way that it can deconstruct from a floating multi-column view to a single column view. And the CSS is what does that work. Now, I'm the first to tell you I'm not a big Bootstrap fan when it comes to SharePoint. You already have to grapple with SharePoint. You add in Bootstrap, and then they start fighting, and then you try to get between them, and they both beat you up. Right?
About the Microsoft component of Bootstrap with the Office, it's got a responsive framework in it as well.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to Bootstrap.
I don't know. We'll see. And the new client framework, right? A lot of people are wondering what that's going to mean. What is that going to do? Microsoft is very great. They showed a very, very, very wonderful, slick brochureware presentation of a responsive image. Wow. Right? We don't know anything else yet. But the beauty of this model is we're completely abstracted from SharePoint. In fact, the many of the ways in which our web parts are built, which is a whole nother conversation, is using purely JavaScript to create the output. The slider, the quick links, the FAQs, the calendar, that's all built using just JavaScript. And what that means is that all this functionality could technically be ripped out of SharePoint and put into another application. The JavaScript doesn't know anything about SharePoint. It just expects to get data in a certain way and then does work with it. So it allows us to say, great, we've built these on Content Query Web Parts. What pain does Content Query Web Part bring with it? XSL. Nobody likes XSL. I know how to do XSL really well, and I don't like it. But using JavaScript and using XSL only where we need to output certain data elements, and then the JavaScript takes in that information and parses it and outputs the HTML, well, that means if I need to switch from Content Query to Content Search or whatever the new whiz-bang pow web part is that Microsoft comes out with, I don't have to barely change anything. The JavaScript is independent of SharePoint. All it wants to know is that data is coming into it in a certain way. So that's how all of this is built. Completely independent.
Using jQuery accordion.
So I'm using jQuery functionality for the accordion, but it's independent of SharePoint. Yeah. It's not really aware that SharePoint gave it as data. It just knows that it's got data that it's going to consume. Yeah. Charlie?
You mentioned the company independent. Do you mean when you upgrade to the SharePoint 2016, the code can remain the same? You have to still do some kind of change?
And or if you have to make changes, the amount of changes you have to make is minute, right? So, for example, the way these are working, and again, I could get in depth in another topic, but they're getting data from SharePoint. SharePoint is outputting something about the data that's being presented. And the JavaScript comes in and says, okay, you're coming to me in a certain architecture that I understand, and now I'm going to reformat it and do something with it. Well, recreating that little data signature, thumbprint, if you will, of data is easy to do. But if you have to unravel intertwined XSL and HTML and JavaScript, then the work becomes even harder. And then, I don't know if you guys have worked in Content Search Web Parts, display templates. Anybody a big fan? Not. It's like a pseudo version of commented out JavaScript. It's like trying to do JavaScript when you're drunk. It's awful. It's awful because you don't have any context. You have nothing. It's all commented out. Yeah, but recreating and putting all your logic in JavaScript allows you to move from web part to web part easy. And even if you had to rip it out and put it in another CMS, completely doable. I could take every piece of functionality you see here and put it into another CMS with a few hours. Pretty powerful.
So since we're taping this, David, if you wouldn't mind repeating the question?
Sure.
Since we're in an awesome Q&A session.
So the question from Charlie was, when you upgrade to another version, say 2016, what is the pain point for upgrading some of these components? And 5 minutes ago is what I said.
Are you using jQuery for the slider?
For the slider? Yeah. That's actually the one plugin that I've got here. Again, I'm not also a big fan of plugins, mainly because I want to know exactly how everything in my site's working. That's one that I didn't mind leveraging. Go ahead.
So a question. Is there a demo site or something online that Catapult or someone else provides, or we can actually go see this ourselves instead of building it from the ground up?
You could call us. I can give you my card. and we can provide you a private one-on-one demo. If you do check out our website, catapult.com, that's responsive. But I don't think we have one that's live on the internet necessarily like this that shows off. But definitely see me afterwards. I can set something up to give you a private one-on-one.
I'll come by and say hi.
Okay.
The online client browser where you reference the mega menu again?
Sure, the online client browser. So the mega menu JS.
I just wanted to see where you referenced the mega menu script.
So it's just like any of the other user custom actions. It's just a script that's loaded in my style library or my custom style library, and it loads on every page. We know the mega menu is something that's going to be fairly universal. So we don't mind loading on every page. Any other questions? Go ahead.
So this is all online. Does this relate to on-prem as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing about it that doesn't work. And again, with almost everything being external to SharePoint, really all I've done here is included some JavaScript references and CSS references. That's it. So there's really, like I said, nothing about it that can't be used in any version of SharePoint, 2010, 2013, 2007, technically. Maybe the user custom actions couldn't.
It says warily.
No. Painful. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the point. So, like I said, with the mega menu, I could set it up to parse through the list on every single page load, but there's no point. A mega menu is not something that's going to change that often. It's not live data, right? But if you think about the kind of technology we can do here, we can still use pure JavaScript. So I'm using content query web parts to parse data. I don't have to. I could just put JavaScript into a content editor web part, load that into the web part gallery, and use that pure JavaScript to go and parse into a list and pull data out. The cool thing about that, and this is where you want to call us, think about personalized web parts. You want users to be engaged, right? We talked to a couple clients before. They were like, we want our users to come, but they don't care about our information. They don't. When is the last time you really cared about your intranet information? So we said, give them something that they can personalize, make them want to go there. Sports scores, weather, stocks. When they go for something they want, they're going to absorb something they didn't want. So something to think about. You can really open up the space of usability and user engagement and user adoption by thinking outside the box. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Can you briefly discuss the upcoming SharePoint framework and how you would actually use that to change the UI and bring in JavaScript frameworks like Angular and React to change?
I'd love to if they gave us more information. All they've really given us is the brief, slick brochureware video of a responsive image. Now, I will say there's some very interesting things that's come up that they did tell us about. One, I think is very cool, is for existing web parts, the ability to modify the properties in the tool pane. Now, what does that mean? So when you go in and edit a web part today, and let's say you wanted a property to be applicable to just the web part itself, not each list item, but the entire web part. Well, it would make sense that you would want something here, something you could customize, a custom property. Not doable in SharePoint Online at all right now. Now, there are some methods, and I've actually done this. Uday's seen it, Ken's seen it. We actually are doing it for a client now, where you can kind of override the information that's here and store data here that actually gets output to the HTML stream, and then you can use that for something else. So what that means is when you look at, oh, actually I'm already doing it. Open all links in a new window. Have you ever seen that? Nope, because I custom added it. I've used JavaScript to override a data storage property there to provide a custom property that I wanted to offer my users. What I'm overwriting is the help URL. Who's ever heard of the help URL? Nope, nobody. But you can use it to store data. So using this kind of overtaking way, we're overriding functionality that's always been there. Help URL has always been there. And I've never had once anyone that I presented said, yeah, I know what it is. I use it all the time. No one uses it. Because if you know what a web part does, you don't need a help URL. And if you're going in to edit the web part, you probably know what it does, right? The help URL allows you to associate a link that says help and send you to another page.
But by repurposing that, you're taking a certain amount of risk that
Correct.
release.
So, correct. The question is, if I'm using that, I'm taking a certain amount of risk that they're going to repurpose it, something they've never done since 2007. It's been there since 2007. And you're taking a risk that someone goes in and goes, where the heck is my help URL? I want to use it. Right? I'm pretty safe with that, I think. But no longer a need, right? Because in the new world order, they're going to give us the ability to add custom properties there. That's pretty cool.
Did they actually say that, or for the web parts built with the new model?
No, they said existing web parts. That was one of his demo items. Yep, that was one thing that I was super excited about, that they actually told us. Because that opens up a whole new avenue of properties. Because you don't want to add a web part level property onto a list item. What that means is every single list item has to be configured. And that may be fine for certain properties, but if you want a full web part level property like this, I want all my links to open in a new window. You don't want to have that on every list item. You want the ability to overwrite it at a holistic level. That will open up a whole new world of items in the new client framework, for sure. How the rest of it works, we'll see. We're not really sure. I do know he said something like, if you drop this web part here, you drop it on our canvas. Well, a canvas is an HTML5 tag that actually allows you to move stuff around devoid of any real structure. So I'm wondering, maybe they're actually using HTML5 canvases. So we'll see. We don't really know a whole lot yet other than what they've told us. Go ahead. Oh, wait, he's bringing you the microphone.
If you create a whole bunch of new Power Apps and you want to use Power BI, do you just create a whole bunch of hyperlinks to those apps, or is there a better way to integrate SharePoint with Power Apps and Power BI?
I'm not a Power BI guy, so I'm not entirely sure. But you can create links, obviously, to them within SharePoint. So.
Any other major interaction or integration between the two?
I'm not a Power BI guy, so I apologize. I don't know. Yeah.
Post Power BI KPIs and things on your SharePoint pages. That's something.
Yeah, I mean, they're really getting big into integration between all of their services, really, as much as they possibly can.
You can embed Power BI objects into the
Yeah.
We're currently doing a big Azure data services pilot with state of Texas, with DIR and 5 agencies now, and we're starting to stretch a little bit the boundaries of the Azure data services and how they integrate into SharePoint along with Power BI. So we expect to see more coming. Probably a good topic later today.
Yeah, actually, we're talking about impacting for BI maybe next month.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time. So anybody have any other questions on what they've seen? They want a refresher? It's grown up quite a bit. The little script engine that could.
User custom actions. Is that, can you do it with another tool or just with this specific tool?
Create them, you mean?
Yes, creating.
You can create them with PowerShell. You can create them with JSON. So I could actually create a custom form within there that allows me to create and delete them. Travis had mentioned the PNP. They actually have one in there that will actually go, well, they've got an app that'll allow you to register a user custom action as well. It's considered a provider-hosted app, which means that its code runs independent outside of SharePoint, hooks into SharePoint, does something very much like PowerShell does, but it's really just using HTML and JavaScript to do that. So yeah, the point is there's no interface, right? If I want to change the alternate CSS, I know I can go into site settings, I can go to master page, I can scroll down, and I can actually change the user or the alternate CSS here if I want. There is no interface for user custom actions, but by and large, it's one of those things that you set once and you'll never change again. Because ideally, your entire application is dependent on whatever you're referencing. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? David?
Thanks.
I don't know about you all, but I'm looking forward to the taped session uploaded to YouTube, and I'm going to be rewinding and replaying several times.
Yeah, there's a lot of information, so don't hesitate to email me or talk to any of us here. Email me for sure. You probably won't see me at the next one because I'm moving to California. One of the few going the other way. So you're welcome.
So do we have your email or?
Yeah, it was on the front of the slide actually, and my Twitter handle and everything.
All right, so we're going to upload to YouTube. Rackspace is going to upload it to their channel. We'll put it on the user group channel. And can we post your deck, or at least part of your deck, on the user group site?
Yeah, for sure. I can get it to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Again, we want to thank Catapult Systems for sponsoring a wonderful meal and sponsoring tonight's dinner. And just to remind y'all that Catapult actually was with us from the very beginning. They helped charter this user group. They provided staff to help manage the user group. They have often been the bailout dinner sponsor. So thank you very much, and thank you to Uday as well. One thing that is kind of new to us is meetup.com, but more important than that, I need to go back in the agenda and open the floor to any announcements by members. Any events, any community events? Is there anything anyone wants to share with the group here? A meeting, an announcement, a job that's being recruited in your shop? Someone who may be looking for a position? Okay, Jim, stand up real quick. So Jim, you're on Meetup. You've got your profile on our Meetup.
I've got my blog out there, SharePointTherapist.com. Yeah, basically I'm looking for my next role, something consulting-wise or firm job or contract. I'm looking for something that's going to be interesting for me. I spent most of the last year implementing a new ERP system and not a whole lot of SharePoint. I want to do more SharePoint. So there's a SharePoint role out there that I can sink my teeth into. I'm really looking forward to doing something with SharePoint.
Okay. Jim's vice president of the city's largest job networking group, Launchpad Job Club. So I don't think he's going to have a lot of trouble finding a spot. But also, getting back to Meetup, we have message boards. We set up forums, 18 of them, for all the different subtopics, BI, Yammer, and one of them is for job posting. So please use that. Jeff, did you have something? Okay. Anyone else have a job they're recruiting for or announcement? Okay. So we're using meetup.com. It's new for this user group, and there are so many great tools in Meetup. One of the things that we used to do at our meetings is distribute meeting evaluation forms, and those are very helpful. They take a little time to do and administer, so what we're relying on instead is your initiative to go to meetup.com and post your review of this meeting. If you think it's a 3 out of 5 stars, put 3 out of 5 stars. If you think it's a 5 out of 5, put 5. Post your comments. It's really important to us. It's important to prospective members of the group. It's important to other members. We're very, very open. You go in and you say, I want to rate this meeting, and you say 4 out of 5 stars, or 5, or 3, or 2, and then you have to put in some comments. So it's not formalized. We may want to get more formalized, but for right now, we want to use that Meetup tool. Other things about Meetup are you come to this meeting, there are people that attended. Again, I think I mentioned, ping the folks you met tonight. You may not have a business card, but you recognize a face. Say, nice to meet you. Next meeting is June the 22nd. Our program's to be announced. July is our typical social, the July social. So we will be posting a place for the social. And make sure, one last point about Meetup, because we've found that some members are not getting the Meetup meeting notices. Well, Meetup is often caught up in your junk box because there's a lot of Meetup email that comes out of, you may be a member of 5 different Meetups, so it may end up in your clutter folder, or if you're using Gmail, it may end up in the unimportant. So whitelist our Meetup email address, if you would, please. Any questions? Any comments? Thank you so much. We've had a great meeting. Thank you.